Brendan, very good morning to you.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad at all, not bad at all. Looking forward to 2025 for more laughs from this increasingly humorous and comical government who don't seem to know their arse from their elbow, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What a disaster this government has been. I mean, that's really the story of 2024. I know it was a big year, stories-wise. Lots of things happened.
Yeah.
But here in the UK, surely the biggest story is that we now live under the most incompetent government in history.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not particularly surprising to those of us who never had much faith in Keir Starmer to begin with. But, you know, they did tell us they were the adults coming back into the room.
Incredible.
This was the return of the experts, return of the calm thinkers after years of Boris and Brexit and all the chaos. And yet they, as you say, they don't know their what's it from their elbow. They don't know what they're doing. We've had riots. We've had authoritarian clampdowns. We've had betrayals of almost everything they said in their manifesto. We've had tax hikes on farmers, on working class people. We've had the winter fuel allowance scandal. It's been one disaster after another with this government. And I'm not surprised at all at that mega poll showing that they would lose badly if there were to be an election now.
That's it. And with every step, they make another misstep. You know, I mean, this morning, here we are. I've been doing this now for, 6 months plus since they got in on July the 4th. And every day you come in and you think, well, they can't make anything any worse, surely, can they? Today, we find out that bloody Bridget Phillipson, who seems to have been sort of honed out of the Marxist school of rewriting history, wants to completely change the school curriculum and make it more diverse and make it less about, you know, a monoculture, i.e. British culture, and turn it into something that nobody's going to recognise.
You know, this is a really disastrous suggestion from Bridget Phillipson because, firstly, education is supposed to be about communicating the best of knowledge to kids. It's not supposed to be about brainwashing them into the ideology of multiculturalism or the ideology of diversity, whatever passing fad the political class thinks is important. That's not what education is supposed to be about. Education is supposed to be about teaching kids the greatest ideas and the important moments in history, maths and English, and all that solid stuff that will help get through life. And yet here we have Labour politicising education. And apparently some of the submissions to Bridget Phillipson from the teachers' trade unions have suggested that the curriculum must be decolonised, that we must get rid of, as you say, any monocultural view of Britain and celebrate that diversity, etc., etc. This is the use of education as a political tool to socially engineer the next generation. Let's be truthful about what's happening here. And there's a class war element to all of this. You know, a couple of weeks ago, Labour announced that it was scrapping Latin in state schools so that, you know, why on earth would poor and working class kids want to learn Latin? Let's leave that to the posh kids at private schools. And, the poor kids can just learn about how to do graffiti or why it's important to be diverse or why we must all play along with the ideology of multiculturalism. There is this idea that less well-off kids are not capable of important forms of education and instead need to be dictated to. I find it really obnoxious.
It's patronising as hell as well, isn't it? Because you've got a British country here which may or may not be described accurately as multicultural, multi-ethnic, whatever it is. What I've described it is as a ghettoised country now, because you've got cities in this country which are entirely ethnically obsessed and completely and utterly ethnically occupied, if you like. And then you've got most of the country which is outside of the cities, which is largely white. And so, you know, we've got a sort of a split personality about all this, haven't we?
Yeah, we live in a very balkanised country. Lots of people now live in their own ethnic bubbles, their own cultural bubbles. And I know it's fashionable on the left to say, whoopee, you know, celebrate diversity.
Yeah, it's great.
All cultures are equally valid. But actually, it's a recipe for division. It's a recipe for tension. It's a recipe for social conflict. And we've seen that over the past few years with the explosions of riots and the explosions of street battles and the explosions of all sorts of ethnic and communal tensions in a supposedly modern, democratic, secular country like Britain. So multiculturalism has wrought a lot of problems for our country. You know, one thing that schools should do is bring kids together. Kids can come from any background. You know, my parents are Irish. They're immigrants. I'm the son of an immigrant. But So that's fine. I have no problem with people who are kids of immigrants, of course. But at school, what you should be taught is that this is Britain. This is the British flag. This is this is who we stand up to. This is who we salute. This is what our country's history is about. School can be a very unifying experience, even in a country as diverse and sometimes conflictual as ours. But what Labour is going to do is use education to repeat all of those tensions that exist in society. So kids are now going to be force-fed all this multicultural nonsense and all this diversity nonsense. So it's a recipe for future tension and future division in the playground and in society more broadly.
And let's face it, you know, I've got kids who have been through the state school system. They're just sort of coming out the other end of it now. But basically, it hasn't exactly been, you know, Thatcherism that they've been being taught for the last 6 or 7 years. You know, they're already pretty left-wing, the teaching unions and the teachers. And every single time I went to visit my son's secondary school, the only thing that you could see as a common thread on every single notice board and every single corridor that you walked around was a bloody poster from Stonewall. And I'm going, why have we got that in a school? What's going on with that?
Absolutely right. Well, that's the irony of Bridget Phillipson's proposal, which is that a lot of this stuff has already been happening for quite some time. And I'm worried at the extent to which schools have become almost, you know, industries of self-loathing. Yeah. Because kids are so often taught now to feel ashamed of British history, to think that this country was born in the sin of colonialism and the sin of empire and the sin of slavery, and we will never wash those sins away. We will have to atone for them for the rest of time. Lots of kids are constantly getting that message from school, when they go to university, in popular culture. They've been educated to hate the nation in which they live. Yeah. And I don't think the political class understands how dangerous it is to teach a whole new generation that the country they come from is a rotten place. Right. It's a really dangerous thing to do, and I do think that Bridget Phillipson's meddling with the curriculum is going to intensify that trend.
I mean, it will, totally. And I see even King Charles getting on the axe. You know, I didn't actually witness live the King's Christmas address this Christmas, but I caught up with it later on Christmas Day night. And I couldn't quite believe my eyes and ears when I saw Charles deliberately making a point of saying how great it was that, you know, the teams of people that cleared up after the riots in the summer because it showed how great multiculturalism is. I was like, why is he even going there?
I know, why would he touch something like that? And the royal family, they will, now that the Queen has gone, R.I.P., you know, she was really the last thread that we had to our own history. She was the living embodiment of British history in many ways. And now that she's gone, I think even the royal family is going to get in on this fashionable self-flagellation. Right. You know, this trend among the establishment to constantly whip themselves on the back for all the crimes of history, and to tell the rest of us that we need to do likewise. And then they're surprised when people tear down statues or say, I hate Winston Churchill, or when school kids say, you know, it's racist to think this or it's racist to say that. It's so lethal, I think, to tell people that the country they come from is a horrible place. And that's the message we're now getting from everyone, and we will soon get it even from the royal family themselves.
I know, incredible. Which leads us on to the other two stories I wanted to talk about today, which is the Times front page, rising toll of young adults too ill to work. Women under 25 now not having children so that they can't work, but actually are too ill to work and are not going in bigger and bigger numbers. And, of course, then, leading on to the next bit, on the front page of the Mail, councils allowing people to work from the beach. I mean, is it any wonder the economy's down the gurgler?
I mean, it is just astonishing. That council story, I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining things.
I know.
You know, one council worker worked from Ibiza for 4 years. And you just think to yourself, here we are in Britain, in our local councils, struggling to, you know, have our bins emptied on time or to make sure that the street lights are working and all the other problems that we have to do.
Council tax going up, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Council tax, etc. And then the council workers who are supposed to be serving us and making sure that our local community ticks along, a lot of them, 731, I think, worked abroad last in 2023. They worked in Australia, Ibiza, all these lovely sunny places. I'm sorry, but if you work for a local council, to understand that place, you need to live there,
Right.
or you need to at least visit there get the bus there every morning to your workplace. You need to understand the community, the people who live there and the problems that they face. You cannot be a serious local council worker if you're in Ibiza sunning it up by the beach. That simply doesn't work.
No, and similarly, you can't get yourself into a kind of a working scenario by being too ill to go to work and just not... I mean, what are you going to do all day?
You know, this rising number of young people who are too ill to work, I find that really terrifying, because it suggests that the next generation is actually pretty broken.
Yeah.
And I think this is what happens when you educate young people to be vulnerable, when you swaddle them in cotton wool and you tell them that they must always hide in a safe space and that words might hurt them and offensive ideas might damage their self-esteem. You teach them to be fragile. You teach them to be fragile little creatures who think they're ill, but they're not ill. They've been educated to imagine that they have mental illnesses when most of them do not. These are just the trials and tribulations of living in modern society, and most of us have to deal with that, and we should have to deal with that. I do think that we've created a generation that is so fragile, conceives of itself as being so weak, that now they can't even get out the front door and go to work. So this is a burden we've created for ourselves, and we need to address it.
Totally right. I mean, we played a clip, I think, on Plank of the Week the other week about, it was a sort of American sort of roving reporter going out in a campus in American university somewhere in California, asking people what they thought a safe space was. And the safe space to them was not just somewhere where they could feel safe, but where they also wouldn't be ridiculed. And you're going, what, you want to go through life not being ridiculed? Well, then don't do anything stupid, and then you won't be ridiculed.
Absolutely. And, you know, we have a twofold problem at the moment. We either have young people who are not going to work because they think they're ill, or we have young people going to work and bringing all those awful ideas they picked up at university about, you know, the scariness of offensive words and the need for safe spaces and the need for gender-neutral toilets or whatever other rubbish they've been educated to take on board. So we have the worst of both worlds. Either young people are at home with their feet up saying, I've got a mental health problem, or they're in work telling the oldies that they've got to respect everyone's pronouns and never say an offensive word and never tell an un-PC joke. You know, these kind of woke tyrants of the next generation, there is a problem there. And I think the sooner we address it at the school level and at the university level, the better off we'll be.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, I think the new Syrian leader, when he appeared on CNN, sort of made out peak sort of wokery when it was, you know, this guy who's come in, who's a former member of Al-Qaeda, and they actually put his name up, Al-Jabari, whatever it is, and then it went he, him. As a pronoun, you go, sorry? What, so the Syrian former terrorist is now a he, him? I mean, just unbelievable. Incredible. Anyway.